For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marla Cook. I'm the Indigenous Education Team Supervisor for our district, the Grande Prairie Catholic School District. And I'm here today to share with you my understanding and my experience with residential schools. September 30th is a very significant day for many Indigenous people, as it is the day that we remember and honor those who attended and those who didn't make it back from residential schools. Residential school has impacted me personally, as my mother went to residential school, my grandmother went to residential school, and a number of my aunts and uncles. I didn't learn about residential schools until I was much older, in my teens, as it wasn't something that we openly talked about, for good reason. It wasn't a good time in our history. It wasn't a good time for my family. Many of them sustained abuses that would never be thought of onto any child, let alone Indigenous ones. It impacted us because our families lost the ability to parent. They lost the ability to share those teachings, those understandings of the ways of our people, and continue it on in the generations to come. It impacted us because there are times in which my own grandmother can't give me a hug, not because she doesn't want to, but because she fears the backlash that she has in her head from those times at school. It impacts us because we see the ways in which parents have now parented. They were taught in the schools, when discipline happened, to hit, to yell, to make the child feel unsafe, and that has impacted us as generations afterwards. Residential schools are a very dark time in the history of Canada and many places of the world. But we can move forward and be resilient in the learning and the teachings of what not to do. Today, September 30th, we celebrate those stories that the survivors are willing to share with us, because they teach us not what to do again. They teach us that a child is a great gift from Creator, and we need to celebrate that. The resiliency and the continuation of the Indigenous people, even with all of the traumas that they sustained, are horrific, yet we still thrive and we're still continuing. I myself have many educated individuals in my family, whether it's teachers, doctors, lawyers, business entrepreneurs. Many of that was sought to be taken away from us, but we fought and we continue on because of the stories that were taught to us by the residential school survivors. We honor them today for giving us those stories and for sharing them with us throughout time, so that we don't return back to that way. And we thank those who didn't make their journey home to us, for they taught us the importance of being a family, the importance of our children, and the importance of ourselves. And so I honor them and I thank them for all those teachings. Hi, hi.
I'm Charlotte. I'm the Indigenous liaison here at St. Kateri and for St. Catharines. I grew up in Saskatchewan, where the last residential school closed in 1996. Growing up, I did not know that they were a thing. It wasn't until the last few years that I even knew about residential schools or what had happened. It's a tragic thing that happened in Indigenous history, and I would hate forever to happen again. We need to remember these children and honor them, so history does not repeat itself.
Hi there, my name is Avery Bovair. I am the Indigenous liaison at Holy Cross. I started learning about residential schools and the Indigenous history and
everyone. My name is Melissa Raskoskis. I'm the Indigenous Liaison at St. Mary's in Sexsmith. I grew up in Fort Vermilion, Alberta, which was home to a residential day school which my dad attended. It's important to remember all the survivors and those that didn't make it through the schools, and to remember and educate yourself not only on Orange Shirt Day but every day. Thank you.
Tansay, I'm Gwenda Jean-Pierre, the Indigenous Liaison here at St. Clement and St. Gerard Catholic School. My family has not been directly impacted by the history of residential schools, as none of my immediate family attended. But as an Indigenous person, we've all been impacted, indirectly or not. It has taken away so much of our culture, and this history needs to be told. I started learning about residential schools when I started working as an Indigenous liaison after I moved to Grande Prairie, 10 years ago, like only 10 years ago. And my hometown is Fort Vermilion, a northern community in Alberta, where there was a residential school from 1903 till 1968. Only 11 years before I was born, and I grew up never knowing a thing about it or that it even existed, let alone being told about the dark history of the residential schools. I believe this is because people didn't want to talk about the horrific things that happened in the schools. Maybe they thought if they didn't talk about their experience that the memories wouldn't hurt as much. The more I learned, the more I understood why it was kept silent. The hurt and suffering that so many Indigenous children had to go through is disturbing. Can you imagine what we don't know? Can you imagine the things nobody ever talked about? I'm glad that this part of Canada's dark history is now being talked about, and I'm hopeful that it will instill empathy in people to not judge and remember that everyone has a story.
Good morning, everybody. Marveline Bauer here from Mother Teresa School. Just to talk to you a little bit about some residential facts that involve me and my own. I'm from the Sturgeon Lake Reserve, and we had a residential school on our reserve. However, the building has been destroyed, but the original church still stands. With some improvements, the community still uses it. A few of my family members have went to residential school, although I don't know the full stories, but I'm very happy to be sharing some of theirs with ours here.
And I'm the Indigenous Liaison for St. John Paul II. Growing up, we never talked about residential schools. It's only by working with the district that I have come to learn about them. After learning about residential schools, I started asking my family if any of them went to residential schools. I learned that my grandma attended a day school. Day schools are exactly like residential schools. They suffered the same atrocities. The only difference is that they got to go home at night. Going forward, I hope to educate the students and staff of St. John Paul II about Indigenous culture and our true history. I hope that from this, there is more reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous.
Hi, I'm Desiree Cleese, proud Métis. I'm the Indigenous Liaison at St. Mary Beaver Lodge. Orange Shirt Day is a time for us to reflect on the history of residential schools in Canada. I have family who attended residential schools and have had the opportunity to listen to many survivors' stories. Please take the time to educate yourself so this is a part of our history that never repeats itself. Remember, every child matters, not just on Orange Shirt Day, but every day.